Welcome to Growing Bremerton Together with Mayor Patty Lind. My special guest today is John Clauson. He's Executive Director for Kitsap Transit. We're going to learn about him, about the transit agency for buses, and that new fast ferry. Please stay with us. Welcome to Growing Bremerton Together with Mayor Patty Lind. I have a very special guest today, and his name is John Clauson. He's the Executive Director for Kitsap Transit. We're going to learn about him. We're going to learn about the transit that we have throughout Kitsap County, and we're going to touch on that fast ferry. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Mayor.
I want to know a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and then how you landed with the transit company.
Well, it's kind of an interesting little history. I actually was born and raised here in Kitsap County. Grew up in Port Orchard. Graduated from South Kitsap High School. But right after high school, while I was going on to school, I drove school bus for about 4 years. And really had a good time driving school buses. Then I went into business for myself for about 12 years. And at the end of 12 years, I kind of reached a point where I decided, you know, I think I would like to go back to that job where somebody tells you to come to work and go home at certain times. So that's about when Kitsap Transit was starting up, and I applied to be a bus driver. And actually, I was hired to be a bus driver, and that started my career with Kitsap Transit 33 years ago.
I know that it used to be a private company, and the Mentor family. And so in about 85 or 83?
Actually, it was in 82 that the voters approved the creation of Kitsap Transit, and we actually started operation in 1983.
There were some old decrepit buses, and there were 3 or 4 houses that housed the operations and the finance and the billing. When was it that you built your first transit station that's down on
Charleston today? It was about 1986, 87 that we built or expanded the administrative offices in that facility that we purchased from the private operator originally.
We know that the buses, you have the South End, you have Charleston, and you've just completed a fabulous new North Kitsap station. Tell us a little bit about what into that station, because it's equipped for the future. It's going to have areas for double deckers, and is it for propane? So tell us what's in that new transit station.
Well, it's a rather large complex. We built a new park and ride. As part of the park and ride, we have a new transfer center where the buses will come together to pick up people and drop them off. It also includes a new area that will be for our operations. Our buses will be parked there. And in that facility, we will have the ability to fuel and do light maintenance of the vehicles, and we have propane there, as well as diesel. And then we also have a bus washer, so we'll have the ability to keep the buses in the North End clean. As well as we've done a bit of remodeling around the building that our operators actually check into and operate from.
Nice.
So it's going to be a big complex.
Well, up until now, you've had to bring those buses back down to Charleston for the washing and the maintenance. And so you're really getting more and more lean by having these different ones. Now, being from Bremerton, we're excited about a next step. We're going to have a transfer station, East Bremerton. Can you describe a little bit about the direction that we're going? It's not a done deal yet, but we're doing all the EIS and the environmental. We're making sure that we follow all the rules, because who funds some of the grant money for these stations?
Well, most of our capital funding comes from the federal government, from the Federal Transit Administration, or even the Federal Highway Administration. So we get a lot of funds from the federal government. We're also going to be receiving funds from the state for the completion of the East Bremerton Transfer Center project. And we're actually moving really quite well with that project. That project, in essence, is going to provide a state-of-the-art transfer center for our riders to be able to move from one vehicle to the next undercover. It will provide for the future that if, and I should say when, we're able to put in high-frequency service along Wheaton Way, the buses will be able to stop and connect with that transfer center without actually getting off of the road.
He's talking about the bus rapid transit, so it's a BRT. It's going on in other major cities around the country. We're looking at it because we're not built out yet from the ferry terminal downtown, where our largest employer is at the shipyard, out Warren Avenue, East Bremerton, Silverdale, Paulsbo, up through to Kingston. So we've got some plans in the future. We just need, it's always the chicken and the egg. So when do you start that? I wanted to ask also, because of this transit station or transfer station, we're actually already permitting, and it's under construction, a 165-unit apartment. And that's the whole purpose of having these stations like light rail in Tacoma and Seattle, where you want development to come around that. East Bremerton has been neglected, so we're looking forward to that.
We're very excited as well because of that apartment complex, because certainly it's going to provide easy and quick access for the residents of those areas to get to the transit. We're also going to have, as part of that project, a small park and ride as well. So I think it's going to be truly what's referred to as a multimodal, but it also, as you suggest, heads in that direction of a transit-oriented development.
That's right. Also, we've got Olympic College right on that route. You're doing some innovative things along with the college. Right now, there's a bus stop that's across the street from the college campus. It's on a busy street right at the edge of the Warren Avenue Bridge. So you already have a design and plans as they build their new building to have a little transit stop and room for 2 buses on the college campus.
Exactly. We're actually going to be pulling off of Warren Avenue there so that we're not disrupting traffic while we pick up and drop off people that are going to the college. So we're actually, as part of their new construction project, have designed in a more enhanced bus stop area, so we'll be able to serve Olympic College much better and again reduce some of the blockages that we occur on Warren Avenue.
The nice thing too is that we have a parking problem in Seattle, in Bremerton. They have it in Seattle too, and also at the college. And when they have new enrollment, one thing that Kitsap Transit has done is they do meet with students when they go through orientation. And you talk about the ease of using the bus, so that, in fact, do they get a reduced bus rate if they're going to college, or how does that work, John?
Actually, our fare system provides an opportunity for youth fares, which is 50% off. And if they continue in their education, i.e. going to Olympic College, they actually qualify until they're finished with their college classes. So they could be 18, 19, 20, 21 years old and still qualify for the reduced fare.
Because of their enrollment. We also have some new innovative things that the transit company has initiated. The first thing was on Bainbridge Island. It's really rural, and they prefer not to have busy streets and the bus service besides the going up to the ferry terminal. And so the BI ride, give us a little glimpse about Bainbridge Island ride and what that means to anyone that wants to visit Bainbridge.
Well, it's kind of it's a hybrid between a fixed route type of operation where the buses travel on a fixed schedule and demand responsive, which the buses just go based on demand. That service up there is actually designed to have 2 scheduled locations, the ferry terminal and the other end of that route, so that people who can go to either of those particular locations know what time the bus will be there. The bus's path that it follows in between those fixed time is truly based on demand. So people will call us a couple hours in advance and we'll be able to route those buses close to their home to pick them up. And it's been very, very successful for us. It operates midday on Bainbridge Island. During the commute hours, we have a lot of buses that are serving the island and bringing folks to the ferry terminal. But midday, it's been a great success for us. And it's kind of a hybrid way of providing service to communities.
And it's really taking off. It's something, it's $2, just like a bus fare, but it gives you some independent travel. The next thing that we did is we're starting a little bit of a loop program in Paulsbo. So between downtown Paulsbo and the college, you've got a system, and I believe that Mayor Erickson has wrapped their bus, and it looks like a Viking. So it gets
very
attention.
good. Mm-hmm.
And we also have started something in South Kitsap, and that's the South Kitsap. Give us a little glimpse of how that just started last year, and that it's picking up momentum as we move.
It is. It's been a little bit slower, but essentially what we've done in South Kitsap is we identified a geographical area. And within that area, folks are able to, it's almost like the Uber style of transportation. They can request a ride off of their smartphone. They can literally see the bus, how far away it is from their home. The drivers actually communicate directly to the individual requesting the ride. So they will get a response on their smartphone that says, you know, I could be there in 10 minutes to pick you up. And it's been quite successful as well. It hasn't grown quite as rapidly, but we're also working to enhance that. We just recently expanded the area.
Nice.
So now people can get to places like Fred Meyer's down there without having to transfer.
And if for any reason that you've set up a time for a pickup and you find, oh, I can't go, my grandchildren are coming over, you can actually cancel that, and there's no penalty, and the driver just continues on their route.
Exactly. It's almost like a direct communication between the passenger and the driver of the bus.
And that brings us to how you've done, again, innovative things. You have a wonderful staff, John, and what you're doing with the technology, the counts on the bus, so you're more accurate as to how many people are utilizing public transportation. That's what's enhancing and giving you the chance to take and make a reservation and not. So in addition to that, for scheduling, you have a lot of maintenance, and you have a lot of buses that actually can use up to 1 million miles on a bus. That's a lot of miles, and so it requires a lot of upkeep on those buses. So your manager of that fleet, you've gone totally paperless. Now, how have you done that? And didn't you do it within about a year to 18 months?
Yeah, it took us about a year in our maintenance department, and our maintenance director, and I first have to back up and agree with you, I've got a wonderful staff. But our maintenance director was able to work with the vendor of the software and work directly with our staff. So the mechanics themselves helped us put this system together. So when we were ready to roll it out, they were already intimately familiar with it, and they adopted it with absolutely no problems whatsoever. So now it's kind of exciting when you walk out in the shop and you don't see any paper. You don't see any job orders whatsoever. You'll see a mechanic with a laptop over at the side, or when they go pick up a part for that particular coach. The inventory folks know exactly, it's all electronic. They assign that part to the coach, so we know exactly how much we're spending on each individual vehicle. And my maintenance director, I can walk into his office and ask him, how much does bus 123 cost us? And he can tell me right there what
That's amazing. That's amazing.
We've actually just expanded that now to our facilities maintenance. So the folks that take care of our bus stops and our shelters and so on, they've just gone paperless as well. So we've eliminated an awful lot of paper that we generate in a year.
Saved a lot of trees. And you've got a great staff. When you talk about enjoying driving a bus and interacting with people, I happen to sit on your board, and I have all the times I've been mayor and when I was county commissioner. And you give out awards for a driver, and these awards are actually from the peer group. So all the other drivers, they select someone that has a perfect record or that has exemplary service to the customer, and I think that recognition is great. It also allows the drivers to take and enjoy some of the things. You have a bus rodeo.
Yes.
Tell us how that started, or some of the winners, because a little person, not any bigger than I am, drove a bus in the rodeo and I think won.
Yeah, actually, it's actually a competition that goes all the way up into national competition. In fact, it's even international competition. We have a local competition, which is an obstacle course that the operators have to drive. They're timed, and there's a variety of things that they have to accomplish, not just driving through without running over cones, but we actually have a passenger on board who determines if it's a smooth ride or not. So there's quite a bit to them. And the drivers that come out number one, and there's different size categories with the vehicles, For us, we then send them on to the state competition. And all the transits in the state of Washington send their #1 operators to the state competition. And then if they get within the top 3 or 4 in the state competition, we actually send them to the nationals. And for the last 3 years in a row, we've been sending operators to the nationals. So our operators have been performing very, very well, even at the state level.
That's great.
And in fact, we have one operator that is going to the national level, who I believe this is his 3rd time competing at the national level. So we're pretty excited, pretty proud of him.
That is exciting. It shows their skills
It
at
is.
that bus driving.
It does.
Another part of Kitsap Transit is the access bus. And when you look across the country as to what it costs or how many passengers actually utilize the service, we're in the top 3 or 4, aren't we, John?
Well, we're in the top
10.
Well, in the state of Washington, we're probably #1 or 2 at best, maybe #2. And that is based on an efficiency rating, which for us we use as how many passengers per hour in that particular program. And interestingly enough, because that is pretty much a one-on-one type of service, if we achieve 3 passengers per hour or greater, that's outstanding. And we have consistently been at 3 or greater for the last 2 to 3 years.
That's amazing. And people don't know that. They don't know all the inner workings of the transit. The shipyard, because there are 20,000 people working. About 14,000 of them are all civilians. And when was that program developed as far as Kitsap Transit and the worker driver
Well,
bus?
it's kind of morphed. It actually was created back in World War II. And it was kind of like a group of folks would get together and buy a panel truck and start riding together to work. And it kind of grew up into, some folks were getting a bus to carry. When we first took over the operation in '83, there were 11 buses in operation. And they were small buses, and admittedly they were pretty tired. Today we've got 34 buses, and they're the largest buses that we own. These are the types of buses that people would typically think of when they think of like Greyhound going across country. They're very large, and 32 of those buses are going to the Busan Naval Shipyard. 2 of them go up to Subbase Bangor.
Again, when someone's hired at the shipyard, there's an orientation. And we try to, so for 30 days, at least 30 days, there is a complimentary pass for them to get used to that particular service. And to ease the parking that's downtown, because there isn't really a lot of parking in the shipyard itself behind the fence.
Generally, it was developed initially because currently the federal government has what they call a transportation incentive program.
Yes.
And the federal government will actually pay for the bus pass for people to use public transportation. But it takes a while for new employees to get registered and get included into their system. So during that 30 to 60 day period, we really want them to develop good habits. That's why we provide them passes to ride the system for free for that 2-month period, so that they can try it out, figure out how convenient it is, and use it while they're waiting for their passes to show up in the federal government.
I know that the Boeing company has been over 2 or 3 times and evaluated the different programs that the Navy has developed, and of course not their journeyman or the program with Olympic College, but also that bus service, because it is so smoothly run.
To my knowledge, it's the only program in the United States that operates like this, and what makes it so unique is that the drivers of those buses are actually shipyard employees in the case of the buses that go to PSNS. They're certainly trained by us, and they are our employees while they're driving, but once they get to work and park their bus, they are shipyard employees and they spend the day. So it's a very efficient operation for us. We don't have to pay a lot of miles for buses to get from the end of the route to the beginning of the route and so on in the middle of the day. And it's worked very, very well. And there's some other advantages as well. Since they're a federal employee, the shipyard will actually train them to be security guards. So they're able to inspect their vehicles before they get into them. They can check their fellow employees' badges when they get on. In case somebody gets on who's not a DOD employee, they know that, and they'll drop them off at the gate to make sure they don't go through. But because they've also inspected their buses, when they get to the shipyard, they're basically cleared to come right in.
That's great. We upgraded them a couple of years ago, and big celebration. You can recognize those buses because they're white and they have some different parts of the county that are described. It does say worker driver.
It does, and in partnership with PSNS and IMF. So, yeah, they're pretty noticeable, and they're quite large.
That's great. So when we talk about mass transit and moving bodies, this passenger-only ferry, we've tried two times before, and we've just had the election. And I bring this up because this is the first time that we've had a more positive in the first two counts than in the past. What this does, it isn't just a quicker ride across the water or the connection between Kitsap County from 4 locations, I'm including Bainbridge, that 35-minute crossing. But what it does, it enhances what you're going to do with the bus service. People in Kitsap want Kitsap Transit to focus on transporting people by bus. They want better service, they want Sunday service, they want more frequent. And you're doing a study right now that will probably take us into next year, but it's going to show exactly what those riders and non-riders today are looking for in public bus transportation.
I think the two big components to the study that we're just embarking on is, number one, to take a look at the structure that we're operating today. I have mentioned this at previous board meetings, and for the public's benefit, the routes that we're driving today are essentially the same routes that we've been driving for over 30 years. And the one thing that we all know is Kitsap County has changed significantly in the past 30 years. So we need to take a look and see if there's a better way to do what we're doing. The second thing, of course, is this ongoing issue that we have between what kind of service should we start putting on the road? Should it be Sunday service or more frequent later evening? And in our survey work that we've done, it really is dependent upon who you ask.
Right.
If we ask our bus drivers, or excuse me, our bus riders, they would like Sunday service. But if you ask the folks in Kitsap County who currently do not use Kitsap Transit but would like to, and what would it take for them to use it, they want more frequent and later evening service. So we're going to be working over this next 9 to 12 month period to try to get a consensus in the community so we know how to move forward as we expand the bus service.
You've already done some of that. We've got some routes within our city, and Bremerton, being the largest city, does have most of the riders that are riding around. Silverdale is getting close because of all that retail stuff. But what I wanted to say is I completely forgot what I wanted to say.
Well, we did restructure some of the service in East Bremerton. I think is maybe what you were heading with. And
I did.
We did, and you mentioned earlier about our passenger counting system. The
Sure.
thing that really helps us with is not only tells us how many people are riding, but it tells us where they're getting on and getting off. Not specifically who, but how many people got on and off at different stops.
Correct.
So it helps us an awful lot to really take a look at the routes and see the areas that we're serving that are well used and areas that we're serving that maybe they're not a lot of riders. So we can make them a little more efficient by looking at that.
I do know that there was one route that you counted maybe one passenger within that hour, and you've just adjusted it by 1 block, and it is making a difference. It does require that an individual or a family has to take and walk an extra block, but when you look at the cost of the operation, the bus and the driver, it has to be something that's convenient.
Yeah, it was pretty significant. And fortunately, you know, those changes have worked out to be a real positive when you look at it from the overall standpoint. More people are taking advantage of the adjusted routes than they were prior to the adjustment.
Right. So we're growing, and the bus is going to remain the bus. Again, I'm just going to touch back on the passenger-only ferry. If this vote continues to be popular, and it's a go, let's describe our next steps. What is Kitsap Transit going to do in order to get that boat in the water and operating by July?
We're going to be very busy. Essentially what we're going to have to do is we're going to immediately start negotiating out agreements. And we really have 3 major agreements that we have to get in place. The first one is going to be with King County Marine Division, who We plan to have them actually drive our vessels. They'll be our boats, our routes, but they'll be their drivers. So that's number one. Number two is to work out the use agreements with Washington State Ferries. Our plan envisions the use of the Southworth car slip so that we can start service there much sooner than 10 years estimated to build a passenger dock.
Sure.
As well as a fare agreement. So one of our thoughts is that when we start service next July in Bremerton, we're still only going to have one vessel. Boats are mechanical pieces of equipment. They will break. So in the event that they do break, we want our passengers to have the ability to walk over to Washington State Ferries and Washington State Ferries to accept the pass that they purchased. So that's the second agreement. And then the third agreement that we're going to have to work out, which is going to be quite simple, and that's with the Port of Kingston, because they actually own the dock in Kingston that we plan to operate from.
And like the bus fleet, the federal government just gave King County Marine Division enough money to build 3 passenger-only ferries. Now 2 have been built, and they're 250 passengers, similar to what will be at Southworth and at Kingston. So the bodies that will be able to be on those vessels, it's going to be an exciting time for us. We've had people that have said, oh, think what will happen to Kitsap County, all the people that will move here because of the access. And we said, they're already here. Every single city, even unincorporated areas, are building for the population that is growing today without having the ferry. So we've got a lot of things to look forward to. John, you have brought us up to date. We know much more about Kitsap Transit than we ever did. And it's not just public transportation. It is transportation for our public. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Mayor. My pleasure.
And thank you, audience, for being with us this time. I'll see you next time.